So I know that you were instrumental, Ross, in developing an LGBTQ plus affirming summer church camp called the Naming Project. Can you tell us about your experience with that and some helpful shifts you made to make just a regular church camp experience even more welcoming and affirming?
Sure. I mean, you can really see an evolution in the time that we've been running this program. And I remind people, the naming project originally, the original way that I conceived it was sort of this like, we're going to run it out of a church. It will be akin to a community center. Logistically and realistically, that meant a 2 hour meeting on Sunday afternoons that we would do. And figured, youth will come in that want to explore this like spirituality, their identity, their faith, all these pieces together. And that never took off. The one of the first learnings that I had for running this in a church basement in Minneapolis was that LGBTQ youth have really busy, full lives and have jobs, are part of after school organizations, are getting in some ways some of their social needs met elsewhere, and they didn't need that to happen here. And we had some that were interested, some that really loved and liked the community, that it was really safe, but also they were busy and they weren't always there. And so, when the camp first was added, it was sort of like, oh, this is good. We'll have this like weekly program and we'll have the camp be something.
Mm.
Eventually we dropped the weekly program just because we could never get that sort of critical mass, especially when it's in a location very local, right? We're only drawing from the Twin Cities area, and the camp was able to cast a wider net. And so that was one thing I think that was a big part of it. And then the other thing was, this lens made us definitely look at and examine camp songs, church camp songs. Our Christian history has a lot of really exclusive language, and that's absolutely true in camp songs. And I only really know the songs that I grew up with and worked, and so made us have to like look and say, okay, what do we do about these? There are some ways that we can tweak them. There are some ways that we can learn new songs, because there are inclusive songs that are out there. And if we're really ambitious, we could write our own songs too, that are that like, take all that super queer element and super faithful stuff and put it together into one thing. And that's still a work in progress. I think the other thing that comes out of this a little bit is finding what youth actually bring to the community, bring to the camp, bring into the program, and then finding ways to turn that into the elements, right? So one thing that also happens where you're a church camp like ours, and small enough, we would do an activity once. And then the next year, everyone expects, well, of course, we're going to do the activity again. It's the tradition. We always
Right.
do it. I was like, we've never always did it. We did it once because there was an activity. One year, two of the leaders, I don't know what they were doing, but they dug through somewhere and they found a mirror. And so we had a worship service that involved a little like remembrance of baptism, but it also involved one of our leaders like holding a mirror up, and having campers walk up, him having to like gently, but has to be pretty persistent, of like, look at yourself in the mirror, which is very
Mm.
hard sometimes for young people to do.
Yeah.
And then speaking words of affirmation about how they are a beautiful, child of God, and that they are a beautiful creation, and they should look upon themselves as a beautiful creation. So there's the mirror activity. And campers come back like, well, where's the mirror? Why aren't we doing that? Like, no, we made it up because we happened to find this. And we're like, well, that would be a cool creative thing to do during worship, right?
Mhm.
Not the thing we always do. And then sometimes these things are things that stick. And I sort of, in the book, I talk about this story of one of my camp leaders loves Dolly Parton and finds her to be a guide and a Christian witness, and what she does, how she acts, the things that show up in her music, the charity work that she does, and bringing that to them. And then combining that with this idea where the camp said, sometimes people, instead of campfire, go out on the pontoon so they can watch the sunset over the lake. And so starting to do campfire on the pontoon, which involved candles, not an actual campfire, and talking about and playing music from Dolly Parton. And so now the thing that did become this tradition is sort of like Dolly Parton campfire on the pontoon. which again is a very like weird specific thing that I don't expect anyone else just to emulate, but it sort of like grew out of what people were bringing. Sometimes campers come with a song or a tradition or activity, and we're like, we really like that. We're going to keep doing it, and we're still doing those things, even though those campers have like grown up and aged out. And I feel like the really like queer elements come from stuff like that. If we could give them the space to bring themselves, to show off, to, suggest stuff to us, and say, great, take leadership on this and take ownership so this program can really, really be for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those stories because there's something really organic to me about that. And, as a church pastor, I talk a lot about using the gifts we have, right? Not necessarily seeking to be the thing that's happening down the road or in the other state or whatever, but using what we have in the community because God has brought us all here, right? And if God has brought us all here to do a good thing together, what does that look like? And that involves a lot of creativity and, shifting. And youth ministers know you have plans like A through F in your back pocket to bring out and figure out what's the next thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I kind of love just the very natural, go with the flow kind of nature of that.
And even when we do, Bible study,
Yeah.
conversations, small groups, I think one of the things we realized a lot is that we still do Bible study, but we will introduce an overall theme and quite frankly, start asking questions of the youth and get them to talk about what they're seeing in their lives and their experience. And often they're finding those parallels, those connections, those themes that are showing up in the scripture passage that, we just read, and getting them to talk about that, which means the conversation never goes in the way that I think it's going to go, as a curriculum developer.
Yep.
But instead, someone's going to share a story, and that, or they're going to share something that really needs to be revisited, concentrated on, taking some attention, and saying like, I can throw out my preconceived idea of where I thought this conversation was going to go, because what is happening here is the holy ground that, I couldn't have pre-planned, putting together. This is how our flow of, Bible study is going to go, but it's still very holy. It's still very sacred. And it still ends up being centered around that same, opening up of scripture and then using that as a way to drive our community.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.